So we've got the whole doom loop thing going on. Downtown core has just been emptied out because everybody working from home. Street conditions got bad during the pandemic. Nobody wanted to work there. Nobody was working there. Now we're trying to get people to go back in there. But in the meantime, city leadership throughout the United States is saying, wow, why don't we just convert some of these empty office buildings into residential housing because we have such a shortage of residential housing. Does that make sense? One of the key things in real estate is it feasible? Does it financially make sense to take office space from downtown and convert it into residential living area, affordable residential living area? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how feasible it is to turn office buildings into apartments. Let's get into it. Here we go. All right. So increasingly cited as part of the way to solve the affordable housing crisis, an architect who specializes in office to residential conversions explains exactly what makes a good one. I have consistently said, this isn't going to work on so many levels. And the feasibility portion is just one of them. Design, feasibility, population, permitting. There are so many different factors that make this not an issue. That it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. But I think when we get through this article, you'll have a little bit of a better handle. I had a little bit of a better handle on, okay, what is going to work? What isn't going to work? How would it work? Here we go. The U.S. housing crisis continues on despite high rates of new multifamily construction, reads a recent report from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies. While multifamily housing construction has reached a 50-year high, the majority of units constructed remain unaffordable. This is as reported by Vice by Roshan Abraham. This increased supply should theoretically ease the pressure of rent growth, but preserving affordability remains complex based on local and regional challenges, resulting in a nationwide decrease in affordable rental units. And though rent growth has slowed since its pandemic jumps, the number of affordable unit losses has yet to be replaced. We have had a housing shortage in general for like the last, 2023? I mean, at least 15 years. And it probably goes, way before that. But during the Great Recession, you lost a whole bunch of builders and developers, and there wasn't funding. And we were already behind on our supply at that point. But then it's just been exacerbated by that whole Great Recession. We've never caught up. And so people are always saying, we just need to build more affordable units. Well, now they're saying, well, we just got to get some people back into the downtown core. Because if you don't have, if you got empty space, you don't have any revenue at all coming in. And what you need in the downtown core is you need businesses there. You don't need affordable housing for people who aren't paying rent, because those of us who are working are subsidizing their rent. That's not what we need to keep the downtown core and cities in general. You need businesses. And so what you need are streets that are safe and a marketplace that is conducive to attracting businesses. When you don't have that, and you're talking about converting it into residential, all right. I mean, you can see where I'm headed with that, right? At the same time, new reports across U.S. urban areas are citing high vacancy rates in office buildings. By high, we mean 21%, up to like 32% in San Francisco, somewhere in there. Those are broad numbers, but around a third of San Francisco's office space in the downtown core is vacant. Last week's New York Magazine cover story paints a bleak picture of Manhattan's commercial real estate glut, a troubling sign for building owners who have seen tenants opting out of leases in Class B and C properties, those older, unmodernized, or less geographically desirable buildings, in favor of newer, amenity-rich spaces that attract pandemic-weary workers back to the office. Similar reports are coming out of places like Denver and Dallas. Dallas's business district vacancy rate has reached 31%, and Denver's 20% compared to the national vacancy rate of 17%. These coupling crises have added to a conversation provoked by the pandemic, prompting architects to explore alternative futures for these buildings, such as potentially converting them into housing. All right, so let's unpack that a little bit. So B and C properties. A property is your best, nicest, newest, greatest amenities, right? A-class properties, the good stuff. So now if you've got a B or a C class property, you're competing against A-class property that the rents have been dropped to what your B and C used to be. They've dropped the A to get down to a level where, all right, yeah, we'll take it. But now you've got tenants taking the A class. And so now your B and your C are basically just left to, swing in the wind. Take Chicago, which is currently embarking on a large-scale conversion plan for underutilized office towers, the LaSalle Street Reimagined, which was piloted by former Mayor Lori Lightfoot. I'm sure this will work out just fine. And it aims to transform 5 properties into mixed-income housing. Most of these are pre-World War II buildings that have contributed to the downtown's 22% office vacancy rate. Again, in a coupling crisis, a new report from the Institute for Housing Studies at DePaul University showed that substantial declines in affordable housing stock in the city have created one of the largest affordability gaps in decades. That's what you got. That's what you've got. So now you've got, you've got a reimagining happening. But I think what these folks are just like, we got a whole bunch of vacant space, got to do something. Let's make it into affordable housing for people. Let's put homeless folks in there. Now, where have we seen this categorically not work? We've seen it in Skid Row in Los Angeles. The Skid Row Housing Authority, how are they doing? Yeah, they're bankrupt. And they basically gave up 2,900 units spread between, I can't remember how many buildings it was, but they had a big portfolio and they were all single room occupancy to, let's call it what it is, drug addicts. Okay. So you had that going on. They went bankrupt. And one of the reasons that they went bankrupt is because they took old properties and tried to convert them. This was in that whole, let's convert. This could be the greatest thing ever. Now, you might say, okay, but those are specifically housing the unhoused, right? And those are people that have mental issues and drug issues. So they go in and just tear up the properties. But my point being is if you go convert old properties, you're not only going to have issues converting them, because conversions, you're converting apples to oranges, and that doesn't always go well. It doesn't go well at all. But then you've got an older infrastructure, your roof, your exterior, your foundation, your parking garage, your elevator, all of those amenities. Those are the amenities that after rehabbing the inside units of these places multiple times, because people go crazy and tear them apart, the Skid Row Housing Authority basically just didn't have enough money based on rents coming in to maintain these older properties because they're so expensive. So basically you need to tear a building down and start from scratch. And so if you've got the numbers to do that, if you've got the money to do that, okay. So now you've got a brand new building that should probably be rented out at top dollar to maximize what you've got going on. Now that's going to be subsidized by your and my tax dollar. So yeah, LaSalle Street Reimagined could potentially add an additional 600 affordable apartments to the meager subsidized housing located in the Loop. Okay. And so your tax revenue goes to zilch. And in fact, it becomes a tax liability because you're going to need partnerships to make that work because, these things don't pencil. They flat don't pencil. I do think an area like downtown where you don't have a lot of existing affordable rental housing is an area where you need to develop more of it. And especially when you think about the accessibility to other parts of the city based on the transit network and other types of amenities that might be available. So part of the doom loop is that as more space becomes available, there's less tax dollars. The city has, one of two options. They can either cut services, meaning cut that transit, or they can raise taxes. Neither one are great options because one just basically eliminates some of the reason you live in downtown. Oh, I can just catch a bus or I can just catch a train. Now you're going to eliminate some of those services and you're going to make it more expensive to be there. The double whammy, right? But those are really your two options. You can only, create more income so much, and you can only cut so many costs. That's just a hard reality. But what we're saying here is, how feasible is this? Said Cheryl Schultz, a principal at architecture and planning firm Gensler. They've been studying such office to residential conversions in cities like Calgary, where in 2020, the firm led a conversion feasibility study of downtown Class B and C office properties. They developed an algorithm that quickly evaluates and scores building qualities and metrics that present challenges to conversions. Large floor plate sizes that make it difficult to divide into little apartments with adequate light. That's a challenge to overcome, right? Facade challenges due to inoperable windows. People don't like feeling they're trapped in a box, right? Can't get out. Can't open my window. Inadequate parking. You're going to have all of these things because they're not designed for residential living. That is not what they were designed for. So now you are trying to stick a square peg in a round hole, and it will not work out. If it is required, inadequate parking, if it's required at all. And since then, they've expanded their conversion studies to more than 700 buildings in 25 cities in the US and Canada, such as the recently renovated Philadelphia's Franklin Tower, and 36 buildings in San Francisco, a city recently named the most empty downtown in America by the New York Times. New York Times is just crapping on everybody, right? Just did a podcast on Oregon, specifically Multnomah County and Portland, where they've just railed on Portland for Measure 110. Older buildings, she says, are the sweet spot. Vintage buildings that have smaller footprints, certainly under 30,000 square feet, seem to do well, she says. All right, what percentage of those make up all of the office space that is vacant in our downtown cores? It can't be that much. It's got to be a tiny fractional amount. Okay, so then what are you going to do with all of these other high rises that are massively empty? What are you going to do with them? That's what we're talking about, right? What's going to happen with them? Are they just going to eat at the tax base of the city? Yeah, when they're empty, that's what they'll do. Transforming these buildings. So basically we're saying the only option is smaller buildings under 30,000 square feet that are older, vintage buildings, because those you can convert. All right. So a tiny fraction of the overall supply out there. Transforming these buildings into affordable housing will be costly, with required subsidies to keep those apartments affordable. Right. Because the whole thing is we're trying to do something, make it affordable in downtown. So we're going to have people live there, right? And expensive retrofitting only adds to that cost. Okay. So you're going to have massive subsidies. So in a downtown core that already has a huge hole in the budget, more money now is going to have to come out of pocket in some kind of private public partnership to make these conversions go. Because the city's not going to be able to do it on their own. And they always partner up with this kind of stuff, right? Schultz believes that private-public partnerships can ease the burden, meaning this isn't a viable project to begin with. And that's why you need to bring in the city to maybe give some abatements or whatever, or just straight pump money into these projects. You're subsidizing the whole thing. This is not a genius decision. You're just trying to make something happen because the alternative is you just let it rip the way that it's going now, and it's an awful look. All right, yeah, 32% vacant. I mean, that's not terrible. No, that is terrible. That is horrific, right? Cities provide the incentives to meet affordability requirements, and building owners create partnerships with outside industries. We're going down some other avenues here. And, for so much of what I see, you've got the work from home impact, and people are no longer working in downtown, and businesses know this. So even if you do start to do some of these conversions, you're already losing money because they have to be subsidized to keep them affordable, right? So the whole thing is just this, well, I guess it's better than nothing is the way I view it. It's not a win-win. And how much money is it going to take? I mean, it basically said, retrofitting only adds to the cost, meaning going back and rebuilding one of these bad boys, it is always way more expensive to try and retrofit than it is to scrape and start over. It just is. But people want to say, well, it's got good bones. It's got good bones. But, if it was designed as an apple and you're trying to convert it into an orange, yeah, they're both fruit. Yeah, they're both buildings. But that's where the similarities end, right? You've got such different requirements for office or retail versus residential, particularly affordable residential, because you're going to have to, do such a song and dance to keep it that way. Some of the work that needs to be done to these buildings can be cost prohibitive. Yeah. And everybody knows it. That's in construction or some type of development. The conversion doesn't pencil. Flat doesn't pencil. So now we're trying to be do-gooders and we're trying to take something and make it something that works. And I get it. But here's the deal. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work. It doesn't pencil and it physically will not work. But if they get a partner, they can reinvest in this neighborhood, she explains. Okay. But if the project isn't viable on its own, that's when I say, well, then no, don't do it. Then the alternative there is you've got a crap ton of office space bleeding the city dry, essentially due to its lack of tax revenue. For how long? Politicians can't wait that long. They need to get reelected, right? We got to do something, guys. Got to do something, guys. What are we going to do? Let's look at that study out of some university. They've never hit a hammer on a nail to create anything of anything. They just sat there and read books and they're, I got my PhD in whatever. And they can, barely heat water on their stove. Rather than seeing a class B or C building as potentially solely a residential property, she recommends thinking of a building as an ecosystem, bringing food and beverage, retail, healthcare, and even public amenities like library branches into the project to shore up both financial commitments. Okay. I would say if you're starting from scratch and these are needed things in your environment, hey, go for it. 2 thumbs up. But trying to, reimagine and let's think of this as an ecosystem. It already was an ecosystem. And then work from home came along and then you basically didn't, defend your downtown cores and you let them become overrun. You had tents running everywhere. That's Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco, LA. That's what's happened in a lot of those communities. So you've got that going on. People don't want to live or work in downtown. There's a larger play than just residential for existing building stock, and that is going to balance out the ecosystem that we need to have neighborhoods that can thrive, she explains. Well, you know what? You know what's thriving? The suburbs, because that's where people are already working. Office space there, office space where I am here, outside of a downtown core. There's not very much of it available. It's just not. It got sucked up because we don't want to be close to where all the crazy stuff is going on. And so, it's kind of a no-brainer. All right, office space in the burbs, it's already happening. So affordable housing could then coexist next door or a floor up from job centers and retail. Okay, maybe, but at what cost? And does this make sense? Or are we just trying to reimagine and rethink something because it's just not working right now? That is what I think we're doing. We're just, we got to do something. Let's do something, guys. Go time, convert it, whatever. Just do something. Schultz believes that this work must start now. Building owners should view municipalities as collaborators in this project to prevent the doomsday scenario that's painted throughout the coupled vacancy and affordability crisis. Collaborators, guys who develop this stuff, unless they are being paid a crap ton by the city, they're going to tell you, this doesn't pencil. This doesn't make sense. Unless you're having us do this on a cost plus basis, we're not doing it. It just doesn't make any sense. So all this pie in the sky talk about conversion, and what's a crazy thing about it is how long it will take. By the time you get these units up and converted, you're going to have a totally different marketplace. I think a lot of the office space will eventually it will get taken down, meaning it will have tenants for it. It's going to take a long time, but as businesses expand and come into different areas, you're going to see some of that office space get taken up because we're slowly but surely going back to the office. That is where things are headed. Things are not headed to, well, more and more of us are just going to, battle it out at home. We're just going to work from there. No, you're seeing more and more CEOs say, you know what? We had better continuity. We had better workplace relationship building skills. It was better working in the office. And I think more and more and more of that is going to happen, but there's still going to be a certain percentage of businesses that say, you know what? We're totally tech. We're totally online. We do not need that space anymore. So there's going to be a big chunk that still doesn't get occupied in the near future. I mean, that's kind of an inevitable, I think. So if we don't, she says, that crisis will only spread, talking about the doomsday scenario, the doom loop. If we don't make these buildings viable from a tax base, cities are going to be in trouble. It's going to impact transit and garbage collection. Those are the services we talk about. You've got to increase your revenue or decrease your expenses. Transit and garbage collection, those are expenses. Sorry, guys, can't come out this week and get your garbage. We need you to just really hunker down and try and recycle as much as you can. Maybe eat less, buy less stuff, because we ain't going to be able to collect your garbage. They're not going to be able to offer city services. That is the breakdown that we're talking about. And that is why these city, leaderships and civic groups are going down this road of just do something. We'll subsidize it somehow. And that's where I'm like, no, that's just not going to work. Look at your numbers, pencil your numbers. How much money are you spending subsidizing something that shouldn't be done in the first place? Because it's wrong on so many different levels. Well, leadership's got to do something. And like I said, they got to get reelected, right? They got to try and get reelected. So you got to be able to say, well, we tried this. We can't just wait until these buildings become devalued. Guess what, folks? They're already devalued. Look at some of the comps we're looking at in San Francisco. These buildings are already massively devalued. And it's because when you don't have tenants in the properties, and when you take a multiplier and multiply it by your rent or divide it by your rent, the whole, in residential, it's gross rent multiplier. And in commercial, it's a different metric. And you're basically just it's capitalization. You're capitalizing rent. And that's what, accounts for your value. That's what reflects your value. When a big portion of your rent is missing, guess what? That value is missing as well. It's not there. So we have already become devalued. That's not even an argument. Making a plan for a city's future shouldn't just address what's new and shiny and ultimately unaffordable. No, it shouldn't, but also just converting it for the sake of it being empty now and trying to do something with it isn't necessarily the right step either. I think cities have to wait this out and they just have to get through it somehow. But this wacky notion of just converting everything, it's not going to happen. And what happens with all these big high rises that are clearly not in the market for a conversion? What's going to happen with those? Do those just sit vacant? Are you going to have some massive fire sales? I think so. Will some of those buildings get to the point where, hey, we could knock this down and do something else? Maybe we build a condo project. It's all based on feasibility, right? Conversion, for the most part, like we said, without a massive subsidy, it's not affordable. It doesn't pencil. It's not feasible. So you've got a lot of entities out there who are just freaked out, don't know what to do, and have to make a decision one way or the other, because if they don't, they're literally sitting in that spot where they're saying, we can't just wait until these buildings become devalued. Sorry, that's already happened. That ship has sailed because of the way that value is determined. There it is. It's going out of the harbor. Yep, that's worth 35% less. And we know this because some of the comps that we're seeing, closed sales that are happening are like, oh, geez, that's less than like 2008. Oh, wow. That has not had that had appreciation, and man, that came slamming back down, right? But when you don't have tenants, when you don't have that income stream, which is the only measure of value, expect your buildings in downtown to, be worth a fraction of what they were. And no amount of conversion is really going to turn that around anytime soon. So this will be it. This is a fascinating, if you're in real estate or if you're in any kind of, realm thereof. I'm not in commercial. I'm a residential guy, but the principles, apply in a lot of these cases. And, trying to make the typical conversion is you take an apartment complex and you make it into a condo. But there you've already got living units, right? They've already been occupied by people instead of people going to work, sitting at a desk and going home. Wildly different dynamics. And that's why I wanted to read this story, to kind of hone in on the fact that it's typically not feasible. And if you force it feasible, that's because you've got a subsidy involved. And, the cities are going to be absolutely scrambling without the tax revenue from all these businesses being where they should be holding their business. But instead, we're trying to, put a square peg into the round hole, and we know they're commercial, but let's make some of the old antiquated ones in less than 30,000 square foot buildings. Let's make those into 600 units of housing. This will solve everything. It's great. It's sweet. No, it's not going to work. It's flat not going to work. And had there been articles out there that would have said otherwise, hey, I'll read them. If you've got one, send it to me on just the most spectacular conversion that somebody has written about on how this can be done, because the vast majority of what I read and what I report is, yeah, it'll never work, right? It'll never work because it's not meant to. It's, you're taking one thing and converting into something else. It's like converting a Ford Pinto into a stock racing car. Yeah, you can do it, but it's going to be really expensive. And that Pinto still isn't going to be worth a lot at the end of the day. It'll go fast, but it's not really the intended purpose, right? All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I will catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.